And views with myself, Salailo Makwidi. The time is 4 minutes past 8 Central African time. And we're going to be switching gears now to a very, very important conversation. South Africa has been among the most outspoken international critics of Israel's military operations in Gaza, the genocide that all of us saw unfold, and the continued occupation of the people of Palestine. We went as far as taking legal action at the International Court of Justice and repeatedly called for accountability over the humanitarian crisis that has been unfolding. But yet, questions continue to grow over why South African coal exports to Israel have not been halted, despite the mounting calls from pro-Palestinian organizations and activists who argue that exported coal could contribute to Israel's energy supply during the ongoing genocide, essentially powering the machinery that is behind the mass murder of innocent men, women, and children of Palestine. And the issue has once again come under scrutiny. This is after the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Minister, Uncle Gwede Gwizi Mantashe, defended continued coal exports to Israel, arguing, and get this, that the government does not directly control commercial trade decisions. Government not controlling trade decisions. Nonsense, man. Gwede Mantashe reportedly stated that companies sell commodities into international markets and determine customers commercially, adding that South Africa remains bound by international trade obligations and that government cannot arbitrarily interfere in private sector transactions. And we're going to be unpacking all of that with Sirhaan Khan. He's a South African lawyer and human rights activist joining us in studio this morning. Sirhaan, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
No, pleasure as well. I want to jump right into it. Your response to Gwede Mantashe, we posted a quote yesterday, and he essentially said, coal companies sell to clients, they don't sell to countries. What do you make of that, especially coming from someone who's from a government that took Israel to the ICJ?
No, it is an absolutely ridiculous response by Minister Mantashe. I mean, he says that businesses sell to companies and to customers, but he failed to mention that the company that is buying the coal is the Israeli National Coal Supply Corporation, which is a state-owned company. So essentially, those customers are the Israeli government. And as we know, we had submitted to Minister Mantashe's department as well, a comprehensive report setting out exactly how the coal fuels the ongoing genocide and entrenches the illegal occupation and apartheid. What is very shocking is the fact that recent reporting indicates that Israel's coal imports from South Africa have increased from being 11% at the start of the genocide to now being 88%, following their co-chair Colombia's full coal embargo on coal sales to Israel.
So essentially, South Africa right now is the largest coal supplier to Israel.
Yeah, precisely. And, South Africa has committed to cutting complicity through the Forum of the Hague Group, where we've already seen other countries take strong action despite there not being any UN Security Council resolution, so to say. Spain is an example who, right at the beginning of the genocide, stopped selling their arms. That was reinforced by the president in 2025. And then again, Colombia, whose president had said that Colombian coal is used to make the bombs that kill Palestinian children. And for our government to now come out and say that their hands are tied, it's not up to them, they cannot take unilateral action, is really an incorrect position. What came out of the Hague Group was pretty much that governments must use their domestic legal frameworks to take action and to hold Israel accountable under international law. We also saw a ridiculous parliamentary response coming from Minister Parks Tau, where he says that, without, number one, a UN Security Council resolution, they can't do anything, and they're also constrained under the World Trade Organization framework.
I want to touch on exactly that, because the minister pointed out that international trade obligations, or under international trade obligations, realistically, South Africa cannot halt, the coal exports. Realistically, can government do it if they wanted to?
Yeah, what Minister Tao failed to include in his statement is that that specific framework has multiple exceptions. Firstly, governments can take action in order to protect human life, the environment, plant life. There's also an exception based on public morals. Um, so under that framework, there are these exceptions. Furthermore, we are a signatory to the Vienna Conventions, which also say that if there are, for example, trade agreements uh, uh, which obligate our government to trade, that if those agreements result in violations of peremptory norms, like the prohibition against genocide, that those agreements are void. And this information has been provided to government. So for us, coming from the energy embargo campaign, we are actually quite outraged at the fact that the minister, despite being provided with this information and the argument around the WTO, and the fact that we know that you don't need a UN Security Council resolution in order to take action. It really is infuriating to see the minister take this position and put that position, in writing to Parliament, despite having, contradictory information.
I want to touch on a point that a lot of people tend to make, and I want us to debunk it once and for all. The fact that restricting coal exports to Israel could carry economic implications for South Africa. How realistic is that? How much of Israel's business does South Africa really need? And could it have, an impact to the sector, to jobs, and so forth?
Yeah, so in Minister Tao's statement, he confirmed that in 2025, South Africa's total coal exports to Israel made up only 2.7% of its total global exports, which is a very small amount. Furthermore, our data indicates that the exports to Israel make up 0.75% of our total coal production in the country. So it really is a very small amount of coal that we are sending. But by stopping it, we will have a very big impact on Israel and their energy security, because last year we provided, and this is on Israel's own financial documents, which state that last year 26% of their coal generated their electricity came from coal. In 2024, that was 33%, and we know that Israel uses a very high-tech, energy-intensive method of warfare, genocidal warfare against the Palestinians. So by stopping these exports, it really will have a big blow on them, and it will not have a big impact on our industry. We know that our coal is in high demand. There are many markets which would be willing to come and take that small share, and really it should have no impact on jobs whatsoever.
Thank you. I want to just get that out of the way, because that's the argument people always presenting: the state of South Africa's economy, and we can't afford, to lose business. I want to touch on the private companies here, the likes of Africa Rainbow Minerals. You tried, and many other organizations, to engage with them. Has there been a response? What responsibility do they have here?
No, I mean, they have a pretty much a responsibility to ensure that none of their trade conduct violates human rights. That is, if you look at Glencore's human rights policy, it's clearly stated that they assign to the United Nations guiding principles and businesses in human rights, which specifically say that there should be no trade conduct violating human rights. The same with the Richards Bay Coal Terminal, which is a conglomerate of these different mining companies, where the exporting happens, where the ships come and collect the coal. And these companies have just as much of a legal obligation to ensure that they are not selling coal to apartheid, that to fuel apartheid, to
Mm,
fuel genocide. And we have protested outside Glencore's headquarters, I think, for the better part of 2 years. We have written letters. We've submitted our report, which has gone out to government as well as to the Richards Bay Coal Terminal, indicating to them exactly the fact that that our coal is used directly in the genocide. It's used directly to maintain the apartheid systems. And we know as South Africans
mm,
that sanctions played such a big role in ensuring the dismantling of apartheid in our country, and yet here we are allowing these corporations to take business as usual,
mm,
which is crazy. And coming back to government says they can do nothing about it, but government has the power to regulate trade, to regulate exports, to regulate our ports, under various
mm.
legislation, to ensure that there is no violation of human rights coming out of this trade, and that is directly in line with the international obligations as well as the constitutional obligations.
Why do you think there's this disconnect, between what is the reality, that is business as usual? And as you mentioned, we're still selling directly to Israel. But then again, you have this ongoing ICJ case that South Africa was lauded over. This administration, this government was lauded the world over, for, being heads and shoulders above everyone when it comes to holding Israel accountable for the genocide. The disconnect, why?
Yeah, I mean, that really is the question.
Yeah.
It really, for me, and in my personal view, it comes down to a matter of profits over people. We'd
Mm,
rather, ensure that our pockets are being filled, uh, despite the consequences that come from it. And yeah, I mean, maybe there's I don't know. When we got Minister Tao's response, we actually realized that he has not taken this matter seriously
mm,
whatsoever, because we have written to him last year, asked about the obligations, raised issues about the Hague Group. It was clear in his response that he didn't even read
mm,
our report, which really sets out all the information very clearly. And it really does come back to the question you've asked. And I
mm,
think we're really pushing and putting pressure on government for answers
mm.
on those issues.
And within the international community, what kind of message or picture do you think it paints, for South Africa? The fact that is, again, the ICJ case
Hmm.
ongoing, but then you still have this trade with Israel being one of the biggest coal exporters. What message are we sending? Are we still painting ourselves in glory, as it was the case when that ICJ case was presented?
Yeah, pretty much. And you can see that by, President Ramaphosa's statements. He was usually in Barcelona, where he
Mm,
spoke about keeping, upholding the rule of international law, and getting great applause for that. And then, how do you go to the Hague Group by day, bring a case of genocide, while by night you are still exporting the coal that is directly fueling that very genocide? I mean, it's really a very hypocritical uh, position. So
yeah, yeah, no, most definitely. I want to touch on, you mentioned the numerous protests that you guys had at the terminals and Glencore offices. South Africans, is there anything that people can do to further put pressure on South Africa, and the government to act against these continued exports, coal exports to Israel?
yeah, 100%. So this past weekend, we activists from around the country all converged in Richards Bay we had a big protest outside the Richards Bay Coal Terminal, which we know is the corporation which allows, where the ships come in,
Mm,
they collect the coal, they sell the coal. Well, yeah, as South African civil society, we really need people to be talking about this issue. There are many things that can be done. There's currently a petition to Parliament calling for the end of the export to coal, calling for accountability of these IOF soldiers who have been participating in the genocide. There's a very big action happening on the 28th of May here in Melrose Arch in Johannesburg, outside Glencore's headquarters, in the which is a global day of action against Glencore and its history of extractivism and human rights violations. And we're calling people to please come and join us in this protest. The more people who are talking about it, the more people who show up to protests and demonstrations, the more pressure is put. We're also calling on our dock workers and our unions and our workers to say no to using your labor, which is fueling a genocide. It is South Africans who mine this coal. It is
Yes.
South Africans who transport the coal. It is South Africans who load the coal, onto these ships. And we really need support of these workers, because they are central to this issue, because they have the power to say no and to demand that their bosses, do not trade with genocide, do not trade with illegal occupation. And we've seen it again in our own history, where US dock workers, I think it was in 1984, where they refused to offload South African goods because of the apartheid. So yeah, there is a lot to do. You can support Palestinian solidarity organizations. You can again come to protest, post about it on social media, raise these issues, ask questions, write to your ministers, tag them in your posts, and really we really want to put as much pressure on government to align what they say to what they do.
No, I think we're going to leave there for now. And I think it's very, very important that you mentioned the workers, because these are possibly even victims of apartheid. Apartheid in South Africa was not so long ago, but they are now fueling another apartheid and a genocide in one lifetime. Really appreciate your time, Sirhaan, and I hope we chat again soon. There is South African lawyer and human rights activist Sirhaan Khan helping us unpack the growing debate, and it shouldn't even be a debate, around South Africa's continued coal exports to Israel, government trade obligations, and just the broader questions around whether economic policy and foreign policy are fully aligned. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.